This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com.
Hi, I'm Cindy Harris. Today I'm making a coconut tea bread. This bread uses nothing but coconut all the way through it. In fact, I've ground the coconut up in the food processor and mixed it with the flour, so that coconut flavor is running all through this bread. Now, whenever I make a tea bread, I always like to treat the pan in a specific way. What I'm going to do is take a little bit of baking spray. I'm going to spritz that on the inside. Then I take some parchment. Now, this is a piece of parchment I had left over, but what I want to do is I'm going to actually fold this so that it's about as wide as my pan. And I'm going to lay it right in the bottom of my pan, fold those little edges over, and then I'm just going to give it one more quick spritz on the inside. And what makes this so great is then when it's time to get the bread out, I just lift on these handles and it lifts the bread out really easily. Now that my pan is ready, I'm going to set that aside and I'm going to get my coconut ready. Now for this recipe, we're going to use toasted coconut and untoasted coconut. So let me show you how I toast coconut. This is just a regular flaked sweetened coconut. I'm going to measure out 1 1/4 cups of it and I'm going to put it in a dry saute pan just like this. Now I brought the coconut over to the stove. I have it on a medium heat and I'm going to slowly start toasting it. Now whenever I'm toasting coconut, I always stay with it because there is some sugars on this coconut and I don't want the sugar to burn. So I just use a wooden spoon, or this is actually a crepe turner, and I just keep moving it in the pan. Now this is about 4 minutes. It's starting to sizzle a little bit. So that tells me that it's going to start browning in just a couple of minutes. Now this has been about 5 minutes and I'm starting to see a little bit of browning starting to go on. Now I'm going to turn my heat down a couple of notches. You kind of see how your stove is acting, but I want this to toast really slowly. I don't want it to go too brown on me too quickly. But you can see, once we get to this point, it starts to change color pretty quick. And just a couple of more minutes, you can see I'm getting some really nice toasted color. This is about as far as I want to take it, where it's just starting to take some color on like this. So I'm going to take this off the heat. Now I'm going to grind up the coconut. So I've got my food processor out. I have my metal blade. And I'm going to put all of that coconut that I've just toasted into the food processor. It's still warm, but that's okay. And then to that, I'm going to add 1/3 cup of untoasted coconut. And then I'm just going to pulse this until the coconut is ground nicely. Now after just pulsing this for a couple minutes, you can see this has gotten nice and fine. Now I'm going to mix this whole bread together in a large mixing bowl. So I'm going to start by putting in my ground coconut, and to that I'm going to add 2 cups of flour, 2/3 cup of sugar, 2 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Then I'm going to take my spatula and mix those ingredients together really well. Now to my dry ingredients, I have 1/2 cup of butter that I've melted in the microwave and 3/4 cup of milk. Now I'm using a 1% milk, but you could use whatever you'd like. I've got 2 eggs in a small bowl and I'm just going to beat those lightly with a fork just to kind of break them up, and then I'll add that into the bowl. Then 2 teaspoons of vanilla and 1/2 teaspoon of almond extract. Then I'm just going to take my spatula and I'm going to mix these ingredients together. I just want to mix it until I don't see any of the dry ingredients. I don't want to over mix it. So just a few stirs, and this is ready to go in the pan. Now today I'm using a large loaf pan. I'm just going to pour the batter in. If you want to use smaller pans, you can absolutely do that. This is going to fill this up about halfway. Then I'm going to use my spatula and just smooth that top out. I've preheated my oven to 350 degrees, and this is going to go in for about an hour. Now when the timer goes off at an hour, I am going to use a skewer to test and make sure that the bread is cooked all the way through. Now I have my skewer. I'm going to put it right in the center of the bread. Comes out totally clear. Now I'm going to let this sit in the pan on a cooling rack for about 10 minutes. Now it's time to take our tea bread out of the loaf pan. I'm going to take just one of my dinner knives. I'm going to run it along the long sides of the pan just to make sure that it releases. I don't need to do it on the short side because that's where the parchment is. Then I'm just going to grab those sleeves and lift this bread right out of the pan. Comes out beautifully. Now I do want to let this sit on the cooling rack for about another hour before I slice it. Now that the bread is nice and cool, we can go ahead and slice it up. Now for tea breads, I like to use a serrated knife because these usually have a pretty good crust on the outside, but they're nice and tender on the inside, and a serrated knife will cut through this really nicely. Wow, this bread is really moist, great crumb, and full of coconut flavor. Well, if you'd like to give this coconut tea bread a try, just go to our website and visit the Come4Tea show notes, and I'll have the recipe there for you. And as always, if you have any questions, please send me an email. I'll see you next time.